Imagine you are standing in front of this massive ancient stone castle. You can see the towering walls, armed guards pacing the battlements.
Yeah.
The heavy wooden drawbridge pulls up tight.
Right, the classic fortress.
Exactly. It's incredibly obvious that this place is heavily defended, right? You wouldn't just casually stroll up and try to take it over. But when you look at the corporate world, the castles are made of, spreadsheets, brand loyalty, supply chains.
The defenses are completely invisible.
Yeah, they're entirely conceptual. So how do you know if a company is truly protected or if it's just, one competitive siege away from crumbling to the ground?
Well, it is the ultimate puzzle, really, for anyone trying to understand markets. We like things we can see and touch, but the most powerful defenses in the modern world are just entirely conceptual.
And today, we're decoding those exact conceptual defenses using this really fascinating 2012 book. It's called Moats, The Competitive Advantages of Buffett and Munger Businesses by Bud Labitan.
Yeah, and it's important to note, Labitan didn't just look at market theory in a vacuum here.
Right, not just abstract ideas.
Exactly. He specifically analyzed 70 distinct businesses that legendary investors Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger actually bought for Berkshire Hathaway.
Which is a massive sample size. We're talking about wholly owned subsidiaries as well as some really massive equity investments.
It's just a remarkable piece of empirical research. And as we dive into this, if you look at the visual behind me, you'll see this sprawling medieval cityscape that it slowly fades into a modern Wall Street skyline.
I love that graphic, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, I chose this backdrop because the fundamental mechanics of defending a kingdom, they really haven't actually changed in 1,000 years. Only the weapons and the terrain have evolved.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to decode these invisible barriers that protect the world's most successful companies. And the goal here is that by the end of this conversation, you, the listener, will be able to spot these very same invisible defenses out in the wild.
Whether you're, deciding where to put your own investments or even just looking at your own career trajectory.
Exactly. But to really understand how these 70 businesses dominate their fields, we kind of have to start with the literal historical definition of a moat. We need to move from actual muddy trenches to these modern financial fortresses.
So historically, a moat is simply a protective barrier. Labitan traces this concept all the way back to the ancient Egyptian settlement of Buhin.
Buhin. Wait, where was that exactly?
It was located on the west bank of the Nile River. They basically utilized the natural landscape and excavated these deep physical barriers to protect the settlement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then, if you move forward to medieval Europe, kings were building these incredibly wide trenches, filling them with water and wrapping them entirely around their castles.
Right, the classic image we all have.
Yeah.
Labitan points to Berkhamsted Castle for this, right?
Yeah.
Which is about, 20 miles northwest of central London?
Yeah, that's a prime historical example. And Berkhamsted didn't just have one trench. It actually had a double moat.
That double moat.
2 concentric rings of water just to keep the invading armies at bay.
But the text makes a really crucial distinction here about how this translates to modern business. An economic moat isn't just a defensive wall you hide behind. It is actually designed to injure the invading competition.
Yes.
So a business moat isn't just a tall fence. It's a fence that actively bites you if you try to climb it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture in the business world, that invading army is the competition. Capitalism is naturally aggressive. The core function of a business moat is to protect what Buffett calls excellent returns on invested capital, or, ROIC.
Let's pause on that term for a second because returns on invested capital, it gets thrown around a lot in financial media. Mechanically, what are we actually talking about when we say the moat is protecting the ROIC?
Well, mechanically, ROIC measures how efficiently a company turns its capital into profit.
Okay.
Let's say a company figures out a new business model, right? And they start generating a massive 20% return on every dollar they invest into the business.
That's a huge return.
It is. But in a free market, that 20% return acts like blood in the water. Competitors see those massive margins and immediately invade.
Because they want a piece of that 20%.
Exactly. They build similar factories, they launch similar software, and they start undercutting prices to steal market share. Without a barrier, that influx of competition forces prices down, and that 20% return inevitably plummets down to, 8 or 9%.
So it's essentially just a race to the bottom.
A race to the bottom, exactly. The natural gravity of capitalism pulls excess profits down to the average. So the moat is the structural mechanism that defies that gravity.
Just the reason the invading army literally cannot cross the field to drive your prices down.
Precisely.
But, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, they weren't born knowing how to measure the depth of these invisible water trenches. Their philosophy evolved significantly over time.
Oh, absolutely. Early on, Buffett was heavily influenced by his mentor, Ben Graham.
Right. And that classic cigar butt strategy.
Yeah, the cigar butt strategy. Finding a mediocre, undervalued company, getting it at a steep discount, and just kind of squeezing the last bit of value out of it.
Like finding a discarded cigar on the street that still has one good puff left in it.
Exactly. Graham's entire philosophy was rooted in the balance sheet. Buy a company for less than its liquidation value. But as Berkshire Hathaway grew, that strategy just completely broke down.
Because there are only so many undervalued companies out there, right?
Right. And managing mediocre businesses is a massive drain on your time and resources. This is where Charlie Munger's influence completely reshaped their trajectory.
Yeah, Munger famously declared, "Let's go for the wonderful business." The idea that it's better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price.
Yes. And the fundamental requirement of a wonderful business, according to the text, is that it must be a first-class business accompanied by first-class management.
But Labitan highlights a fascinating contradiction here regarding the brutal nature of capitalism. Normally, if a bad manager takes over a decent business, the reputation of the business gets destroyed.
Right.
But a truly wonderful business, like one with a deep structural moat, can actually survive a period of bad management. Now, I have to push back on this a bit, though. Are they seriously suggesting a CEO doesn't matter? Wait, so a moat can be so powerful that a terrible CEO couldn't even ruin the company? Is the business basically on autopilot?
Well, no, it's not that the CEO doesn't matter at all, but rather that the structural advantages of the business are stronger than individual human error.
Okay, I see.
Munger and Buffett, they actually often joke that you should invest in a business that any idiot can run because sooner or later, one will.
That's hilarious and probably true.
It really is. If your company's survival relies entirely on having a visionary, once-in-a-generation genius at the helm every single quarter, you don't actually have a moat. You just have a very smart guard standing in front of a completely undefended door.
That makes perfect sense. The business mechanics themselves have to do the heavy lifting. Munger actually asks in the text, how do you compete against a true fanatic? You can only try to build the best possible moat and continuously attempt to widen it.
Which implies that the defense is never static.
Right. The invading army is always building taller ladders, so you have to just keep digging the trench deeper.
Precisely. And this leads us to the structural architecture of the moat itself. Labitan distills all sustainable competitive advantages down into two primary categories.
Categories out of everything.
Just two.
Yeah.
You either have a cost advantage or you have differentiation, which he refers to as a special advantage.
Cost versus special. You are either definitively cheaper or you offer something uniquely different.
Exactly. And it ties back perfectly to the traditional marketing mix. Product, price, place, promotions, all those elements have to ultimately come together in the mind of the customer to create real loyalty.
And to give you an idea of the sheer scale of this, Labitan lists the specific types of advantages Buffett and Munger aggressively hunt for. It's a pretty comprehensive list.
Yeah, it includes brands, patented technology, lower cost of production, economies of scale,
location, distribution systems, specialized services, networks.
Right, and regional monopolies and intangible assets that create high switching costs.
That's quite a list.
What's fascinating here is how those intangible assets often manifest as profound psychological barriers for the customer. A moat doesn't just exist in a supply chain, it has to exist in the mind of the consumer.
Oh, totally. High switching costs are a perfect example of that. It's an invisible, yet impenetrable trench.
Absolutely.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think of your favorite coffee shop, right? You keep going back, either because it's cheaper than anywhere else, which is a cost moat, or because they make a vanilla latte you literally can't get anywhere else, which is a special moat. Or think about your smartphone.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right. Let's say you've been using an iPhone for a decade. All your family text threads are on iMessage, your thousands of photos are synced to iCloud, and you've already bought a Mac and an Apple Watch that seamlessly talk to each other.
You're completely locked in.
Completely. Even if a competitor releases an Android phone that is objectively 15% faster and 15% cheaper, are you really going to switch?
For the vast majority of consumers, the answer is just no. The financial cost of the new phone is irrelevant compared to the psychological friction and, the sheer time required to migrate your entire digital life.
That friction is the moat.
Right. The competitor has built a better, cheaper weapon, but they simply cannot cross the trench of your switching costs.
And when you look at the 70 companies Labitan analyzed, you see these dynamics playing out across wildly different industries. We're talking about Acme Brick, Benjamin Moore Paint, Coca-Cola, Costco, and IBM.
Such a diverse group.
It really is. The physical products are completely unrelated. Bricks, paint, soda, bulk groceries, mainframe computers. But the underlying architecture of their defense is identical.
Let's examine how these theoretical frameworks actually operate on the battlefield. Labitan specifically highlights a company called Les Schwab to demonstrate a special moat.
Okay, let's talk about Les Schwab.
Yeah, Munger was actually such a massive fan of their operational model that he recommended reading the autobiography, Les Schwab, Pride and Performance. Keep it going.
Now, Les Schwab ran tire shops in the Midwest. And selling tires is a notoriously grueling, low-margin, highly commoditized space. It's not software. It's rubber.
Right, exactly.
So how do you build an invincible fortune selling rubber? The text attributes it to having good systems. That was his specialty. But I want to dig into the mechanics of that. Good system sounds like a generic corporate buzzword. What does that actually mean structurally?
Well, in a commoditized industry like auto repair, the single greatest point of friction for the consumer is trust.
Oh, definitely.
There is a massive information asymmetry. The mechanic knows exactly what's wrong with your car, and you don't. You are constantly worried you are being overcharged or sold something you don't need.
I feel that every time I get my oil changed.
We all do. So Les Schwab's good systems weren't just about moving inventory efficiently, though they obviously did that. Their systems were designed to completely eliminate that information asymmetry.
How so?
They implemented aggressive employee profit-sharing programs, they empowered local managers to make immediate decisions, and they instituted rock-solid guarantees on their work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they essentially engineered a system where speed, reliability, and absolute trust were guaranteed at every single location. In a low-trust industry, a high-trust operational system becomes a special advantage.
Because competitors without those deeply ingrained, culturally enforced systems couldn't replicate the customer experience.
Exactly. The trust itself became the moat.
So a special moat can be purely operational if it fundamentally changes the customer's psychological experience.
Yes, absolutely.
But let's look at the other side, the cost advantage. Labitan uses Geico auto insurance as the ultimate masterclass here. And this perfectly illustrates what we meant earlier by a fence that bites the competition.
Geico is perhaps the most textbook example of an offensive moat. Their structural advantage was a direct marketing.
Right.
Long before the internet, Geico bypassed the traditional industry model of using a massive nationwide network of local insurance agents. By selling directly to the consumer, they stripped enormous amounts of overhead and commission costs out of their pricing structure.
This raises an important question, though. Why didn't the competition just lower their prices to match Geico? If a giant legacy insurer sees Geico stealing market share, they have plenty of money. Why not just match the price?
Because of a structural trap called channel conflict.
Channel conflict.
Yeah. If a massive traditional insurer wants to match Geico's direct-to-consumer price, they have to cut the commissions they pay to their thousands of local agents. If they cut those commissions, their agents will just revolt, quit, or start selling competitors' policies.
Oh, I see.
The traditional companies are entirely handcuffed to their legacy distribution networks. So Geico's cost advantage actively injures the traditional model because the traditional insurers cannot respond without destroying their own sales force.
That is the biting fence. They built a business model that essentially weaponizes their competitors' own infrastructure against them.
It's brilliant.
But, an advantage is only as good as its durability. And that is where Geico's integration into Berkshire Hathaway becomes a secondary compounding moat.
Yes, and Labitan provides vital context on the broader insurance industry to explain this. Insurance is essentially just the business of cooling risk, right?
Right.
For minor car accidents, that's relatively predictable. But what happens when there is a massive catastrophic event, like a major marine disaster, an aviation crisis, or a localized natural disaster like a hurricane?
A small insurer could get completely wiped out by a single bad hurricane season if they have too many policies in one area.
Exactly, which is why insurers constantly have to buy reinsurance.
Which is essentially insurance for insurance companies.
I got it. They need it to protect against catastrophic ruin. But Geico is backed by the staggering size and capital rating of Berkshire Hathaway and its time-tested operational soundness.
Right.
Berkshire's balance sheet is so massive that Geico doesn't have to rely on expensive third-party reinsurance the way smaller competitors do.
Yeah.
They have a permanent internal buffer.
So it's a dual-layered moat. The direct-to-consumer model protects their pricing on the front end, and Berkshire's massive capital pool protects them from catastrophic ruin on the back end.
Exactly.
And I think it's crucial to point out the rigorous, forward-looking nature of this analysis. Labitan didn't just guess at these moats.
Yeah.
He utilized a massive collaborative research process.
Yeah, it involved Professor Fanitej Adadam's MBA students at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, along with financial professionals like Rick Conrad and Dr. Malik Suthar.
So a really robust team.
Very robust. And this raises an important question. The central question that research team had to answer wasn't just, why is this company successful today? The true test of a moat is predictive. They had to ask, are these specific competitive advantages structurally sustainable for the next 10 years?
10 years into the future. It forces you to look beyond current profit margins and ask if the water in this trench is deep enough to survive weapons that hasn't even been invented yet.
Yes.
If your advantage only explains your past success but offers no protection against future disruption, you don't really have a moat. You just had a temporary head start.
And this brings us to the core utility of Labitan's work. I mean, this framework isn't just for billionaires allocating capital. It is a lens through which you can evaluate any competitive environment.
So what does this all mean? How do you, listening to this deep dive right now, take the lessons of ancient Egyptian trenches and corporate fortresses and apply them to your own life?
That's the real question.
Because the reality is, you are operating in a highly competitive marketplace right now. Whether you're running a small business, managing a department, or just navigating your own individual career, you need to understand your personal architecture.
It demands rigorous self-reflection. Ask yourself, are you competing entirely on cost? Are you simply the most efficient, lowest friction option for your employer or your clients?
Right.
Or do you possess a special advantage? Do you have a highly unique combination of skills, deep institutional knowledge, or a specialized network that creates a high switching cost?
Yeah, like if you leave, how much pain and friction will it cause your company to replace you?
Exactly.
If you were just a decent employee doing decent work, you were the equivalent of Ben Graham's cigar butt.
Yeah.
You might get picked up, but you are ultimately disposable. You want to be the wonderful business.
You really do.
You want to build a personal moat so wide that even if the leadership at your company temporarily loses their minds, your intrinsic value remains completely untouchable.
And remember that building a defense is a continuous daily operation. The moment you stop deepening the trench, the invading army starts filling it with dirt.
Wow. We have journeyed all the way from the double water-filled moats of Berkhamsted Castle to the invisible, compounding fortresses of Berkshire Hathaway. The golden rule from Bud Labitan's research is incredibly clear.
Seek out wonderful businesses.
Or build yourself into one, with enduring structural barriers. Whether it is a ruthless cost advantage that traps your competitors, or a deeply unique special advantage that creates psychological loyalty, you must have a mechanism that protects your returns and actively repels invaders.
It is the unifying theory behind 70 of the most successful acquisitions in history, the invisible architecture of dominance.
Beautifully said.
But as you evaluate these structural defenses in your own life, consider what happens when the very nature of the terrain fundamentally alters. We've established that long-term survival depends on a moat protecting an economic castle. But what happens to that carefully constructed business when a sudden, massive technological shift, like the rapid acceleration of artificial intelligence or a decentralized web, essentially dries up the water in the moat, allowing the competition to simply walk across the dry riverbed?
Oh, man.
How do you defend a castle when the very nature of the battlefield changes overnight?
That is the ultimate existential test. You might be standing in front of what looks like an impenetrable stone wall with heavy drawbridges feeling perfectly secure. But if the invading army suddenly learns how to fly, all those invisible defenses you spent a lifetime building might not mean a thing. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking for those invisible barriers in the world around you. Keep widening your own trench, and we will catch you next time.